So recent events of looting and violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng have highlighted the important role that breastfeeding plays in securing food for children as well as promoting good outcomes for infants. That's according to Stasha Jordan, Executive Director of the South African Breastmilk Reserve. Jordan says the unrest in the country recently also increased concerns around food security for most people. While Stasha Jordan, Executive Directors are saying of the South African Breastmilk Reserve, joins me now to talk more about this. Stasha, so grateful for your time on Women's Day. Thank you for being with us. Let's talk about how the nutrition of infants was affected by what we saw on our streets in July.
Well, it was very, very unexpected, difficult times, especially in the provinces of KZN and Gauteng. And what happened was that due to the looting and the burning down of many of the distribution centers, babies that were formula dependent were left wanting for food. And this obviously raised our awareness because babies that are younger than 6 months are recommended, according to our national policy, to be exclusively breastfed. It again highlights the way in which breastfeeding offers food security for babies that are exclusively breastfed in a time where formula feeding may not be possible. And our hearts reach out to those babies and moms that found themselves in difficult times. We organized, many funders organized to support these moms, and we organized as the human milk banking community to collect donated breast milk for the human milk banks in the affected areas, because obviously the hospitals that use donated breast milk were also affected by the looting.
And Sasha, we don't talk about a service such as yours in a lot of conversations in South Africa. For the benefit of those of us who are hearing about you for the first time, let's speak about the work of the South African Breastmilk Reserve and how it works and who can access what you do.
Certainly. The South African Breastmilk Reserve is a human milk banking organization. We are a charitable organization that collects and supplies donated breast milk to babies that are born prematurely in public hospitals and private hospitals, because we recognize that all children have a right to access good quality health and life. And that donated breast milk plays a key role in reducing infection in the early days postpartum. So we feed primarily babies that are born prematurely that weigh as little as 500 grams, which is tiny. And in these instances, donated breast milk is a lifesaver, especially because it caters for those babies that are unable to access mother's own milk, and maternal lactation often fails. For instance, when moms are hospitalized as a consequence of COVID or other adverse health outcomes for mothers, which may impact lactation. So in these cases, donated breast milk plays a key role. We feed 6,000 premature babies annually, and we're one of the 4 or 5 human milk banking organizations nationwide.
I mean, it's a dreadful thought, but I'm wondering what the consequences might have been for some of these infants if you were not able to spring into action and make alternative arrangements during that week of violence in July.
We know that some moms had to drive as far as 200 kilometers to find formula feeds, and what we saw were dangerous recipes for homemade formulas that are not adequate in the context of public health. And that's why we reach out. We recognize that there are gaps in offering breastfeeding support to women that are breastfeeding. However, what we are asking mothers during this time, in times of uncertainty, in times of high risk, please consider your feeding choices from a point of view of food security. What offers your baby food security? And breastfeeding does afford your baby a certain amount of food security, particularly in the first 6 months, because it is easier to find food for the mother and find water for the mother than it is to find food for the mother and the baby in a time of unrest, as we saw during the looting.
How easy is it then for yourselves and new mothers to link up? Is there a service at the point of birth in hospital where a doctor makes an analysis and then links the mother with yourselves?
We wish we were that advanced. However, we're working in that direction. We have a wide network of healthcare professionals that, by word of mouth, support our efforts. But I also want to remind us that just as World Breastfeeding Week comes to a close, the theme is protect breastfeeding. It's a shared responsibility. And what we are talking about, we're talking about the fact that it takes a village to breastfeed a child. We need to create enabling environments that support all mothers to breastfeed, especially in the first 6 months of life. So when you access your health facilities, when you give birth, please identify your breastfeeding tribe early on in your journey. Have a birthing plan, commit to breastfeeding, find the support structures that will support you on your breastfeeding journey. And once you have established lactation, and lactation is in your reach, please consider donating your breast milk, because it makes a world of difference to the very tiny premature babies that need your support.
I may have missed this in our earlier responses to each other, but prior to the focus in July from people when you then issued that call for help, did you see a lot of demand versus supply?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier on, COVID has had quite an impact on pregnant women in the third trimester. 1 in 6 that were admitted to hospital were admitted to intensive care, and 1 in 16 demised as a consequence of COVID. So what we did find ourselves with during the second and third wave was an increased number of recipient babies that had been orphaned as a consequence of COVID. And that is quite notable, because it means that that baby will never have access to mother's own milk, which puts an increased demand on the human milk bank to provide breast milk for longer periods of time, so that we can see the baby out of the danger zone, which is the first month of life, basically, for these really tiny ones. So yes, we had demand. The demand was great. The demand is always great. Much like with the blood banks, we supply 80 neonatal intensive care units. We are really pushing every single day to collect breast milk. We distribute 1,500 units a month from our head office, and that excludes the 28 public hospitals that on a daily basis are collecting donated breast milk.
And Stasha, for mothers who are unable to breastfeed for whatever reason, I'd imagine that does quite a number on them psychologically and emotionally.
Certainly, and that is why I indicated in one of my responses that identifying your tribe, your support structure early on plays a very important role in preventing a lot of the disappointment which may come from not having the adequate support. So whilst breastfeeding is natural, it does not always come naturally. It is something that we learn. And so when it is hard at first, we always tell mommies that this is a learning curve. It's something that the baby has to learn. It's something that you have to learn how to do. And it comes more or less easily depending on the mother and depending on the breast. But there are a lot of support structures to help moms who may have a perception that they are unable to breastfeed or that their breast milk may not be good enough. Before you make these decisions by yourself, consult your healthcare provider, access a lactation consultant, speak to your midwife, because we are here. There is a tribe of women that is wanting to support you, and we want you to know that we are available online. There are organizations like the La Leche League. The various departments of health have a number of educational programs. So we definitely want to support mothers to access breastfeeding as universally as possible, because it is accessible. For those in those very few specialized cases, please access your healthcare provider for nutritional advice.
Stasha Jordan, good to speak to you on this Women's Day. Thank you so much for being on Newsfeed PM.
Thank you.